the 12th day already of April 2022. I hope everybody's doing okay. So for nuclear industry, of course, we're killing it again tonight with 4 people on the show. We got a big poll for everybody tonight. Are Japan's nuclear regulators evil monsters, despicable scumbags, for letting kids go to school in Okuma, which is a nuclear wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns? Such an important poll. Such an important poll. There is no one to fight for the victims of Japan. There's no one to fight for the children of Japan. And so the monsters, which is nuclear, are vicious. It appears they hate children. They're moving children back into a nuclear wasteland. The guy to your right up there, or to your left, is the mayor of Okuma, which has 14 million one-ton bags of radiation stored in it. And no one lives there, and they're going to send children back in there. Right alongside of it are reactors that are melting down for 12 years. There's 2 of them, reactor 4 to the right, reactor 3 to your left, the reactor 1. And there's reactor 2. This is surrounded by no-go zones. It's in a no-go zone. Only 10% of the town is open. 90% of the no-go zone is off limits because of very, 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 very high levels of radiation. But to send the children back into the nuclear wasteland it takes a certain type of disconnect to do something like that in the first place. That's nuclear, the nuclear industry. And then they poison you in your hospitals on top of that. Town hit by the nuclear disaster, Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Call it what it is, you sack of shit, you. Excuse the language. Welcome school kids back for the first time. School kids! They're welcoming anybody back for the first time to live, right? You can't live in the nuclear wasteland. These kids are not going to live there. They're being bused there to go to school to try to make nuclear look reasonable. To who, I can't imagine, but that's what they're up to. A kid is welcomed by many of the town's residents. Well, they don't live there. And public workers, which is the majority of the people that don't live there. In Okuma, Fukushima Prefecture, which is the nuclear wasteland itself, has been abandoned till the children went there. And only 10% of the town is considered open, but that's a construct. The 90% of the community is radioactive. 14 million radioactive bags, 1-ton bags of radiation in the town. Welcomes the smiles and cheerful voices of children entering child care and school. For the first time since the municipality was evacuated in the wake of the earthquake, the tsunami nuclear meltdown struck the region. Well, the only thing that matters is the meltdown. 26 pupils, 200 parents, and townspeople attended the ceremony. 200 parents. I doubt it. I don't see no evidence of it, or they would have showed it to you, wouldn't they? Ahead of the opening of a new educational facility. This is Okuma, by the way. In the nuclear wasteland. They have to drive past this to get to school. There's 14 million, it goes for a long way, 14 million 1-ton bags of radiation. And they're doing what? They're sending children to school? Catering to pupils through junior high school age. Most of the children were born after the earthquake, after the nuclear meltdowns. and will now only experience life in a nuclear wasteland. It's the site of the nuclear disaster, the nuclear meltdowns, where a triple meltdown, supposed to be with an S, you scum, occurred after the powerful quake in 2011. So you always got to blame it instead of just having a conversation, right? They got to throw the blame at the earthquake rather than actually talk about what's going on. But they won't talk about what's going on. That's how they do this. The municipality daycare center closed in the town's 5 kindergartens and elementary and junior high school had to relocate their classes. They claim they all moved to the same city, which is not true. Where they rented an empty school building and other facilities 100 kilometers away. That's not true, and that's a nuclear wasteland too, by the way. At the time of the nuclear meltdowns, aka disaster, some 1,600 pupils in the town were attending classes from daycare through junior high. They actually opened up a certified daycare in a nuclear wasteland. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. They're 2 kilometers away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns that underneath the covers look like that and that. And then officially they claim it looks like this, but it obviously can't. Evacuation orders were lifted in part of Okuma, 10% of the town, and which is a repository for millions and millions of 1-ton bags of radiation. Her home is within the area being used as an interim storage facility, so she can see the 1-ton bags from her living room window, basically, for contaminated soil and other byproducts of the only other byproduct of decontamination work in the prefecture is the nuclear meltdown. So they're storing stuff from Fukushima nuclear meltdown in the same town where they got the kids. So there is no functional nuclear industry. There's this bizarre creature. Nuclear radiation, by the way, is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Do you think that person there is a nuclear scientist, nuclear academics, nuclear physicists, nuclear professors, nuclear students? Well, you're wrong if you do. And by the way, if you don't understand, you don't believe me, go mark on those bags, each one of them, that Dana is wrong. Go there and mark on all of these bags, Dana is wrong. Wall Street Journal officials sharply raised the radiation levels for the residents to get iodine pills after the meltdown, 75 times higher than the batshit crazy World Health Organization so-called standards, which is United Nations. United Nations got about 300 entities: World Health Organization, International Atomic Energy Agency, UNICEF. You got hundreds and hundreds. They got the tourists, blah blah blah. They invaded every facet of your lives worldwide. This is a corporation. Excuse me. We got a poll tonight. Are Japan's nuclear regulators evil monsters for letting kids go to a school in Okuma, which is a nuclear wasteland where only 10% of the community is open? Absurd censorship last night. Absurd. And I can see again tonight, they're not happy we're talking about the victims. So they've been censoring me viciously for so long that evil now is natural for them, right? They don't understand that they're actually evil. They're getting a paycheck, they're getting $20 an hour to censor the most important conversation in history, and they're happy to have the job. Can you imagine how stupid they actually are? That someday they're going to have to live with what they're doing. Child's risk of cancer and they're doing for a paycheck, like these monsters are doing for a paycheck. These victims are victimized so people can get a paycheck. Did you hear me? They're destroying everybody so they can get a paycheck because they can't get a job anywhere else. That's the only job they can get. Child's risk of cancer from radiation is 100 times higher than an adult with the same exposure. So why would you move them into a nuclear wasteland, right? 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, children start to see heart problems like hole in their hearts. Remember, you couldn't go back into the control room for 7 years, right? But they allegedly went back into the nuclear meltdown, into the fuel pools. Which, by the way, that's a fake fuel pool because it doesn't exist. There is no top to the building. The building was completely destroyed. But officially, they went back there 7 years after. Now, they claim they went back in the building and got the fuel out of the pool in 2013, 2014. 3 years after, but they couldn't get to the control room, which was in a different place altogether, for 7 years. And because you let them get away with that, now they're attacking the children. Children play at a nuclear theme park in Japan. The character sings that it's very safe, efficient, and good for you. So this is mass hypnosis, mass brainwashing. When you can't even go to a theme park and the nuclear industry has invaded it and is viciously brainwashing the vulnerable children, what do you call that? It makes Orwellian look like a cakewalk. Japanese medical experts deeply concerned about the children radiation exposure. 51% of the children are contaminated with cesium at the hospital. It's not just cesium. I really disrespect anybody that says cesium because the media done that. Some had clothing indicating high-level gamma rays, fuel particulates. Gamma rays, which meant their hair was full of gamma ray in their lungs. They gave over 80,000 children dosimeters that they can't read themselves. They have to send it to a university, because you can imagine what they're up to by doing that, rather than move them out of the nuclear wasteland. So the poll asks a pretty relevant, important question. Are Japan's nuclear regulators evil monsters for letting kids go to school in Okuma Nuclear Wasteland? Well, yes, of course they are. And so, how is this even possible? That they're putting children in a school 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns where only 10% of the community is open with 14 million one-ton bags of radiation and nuclear waste from the nuclear meltdown itself stored. The ocean itself is, fuel assemblies would have landed right there off the coastline of Okuma and in Okuma. Some school facilities in Fukushima City is exceeding radiation limits by 1,000%. Imagine how bad it is in Okuma. 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pools that detonated in meltdown. 1,000%. Extremely disturbing. This is Greenpeace. Greenpeace, of course, won't acknowledge that they faked reactor 3 and 4. They blocked me on their Twitter accounts. I guess I should apologize for caring, I suppose. Obviously, I'm a pretty weirdo that I give a shit. Why should you give a shit, Dana? I don't know, all these kids.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Does anybody think she's there? Where's Charlie to? Give us a call, Charlie. Tell us how she's at Reactor 4 fuel pool. "60 kilometers from Fukushima. Kids walk to school on roads contaminated with radioactivity of 70,000 becquerels a square meter." So imagine now kids are just a couple of kilometers, 2 kilometers away. Excuse me. La la. La 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 la. Let's give Charlie a call. Stalker. Where's Stalker to tonight? I haven't seen him. That's a little disappointing. Where's Calm Down Charlie to when you want him? I can't win them all, I suppose. Let's try another one. These are stalkers, right? Been stalking me for a decade. Oh, that backfired.
The person you are calling is currently unavailable. Please leave a message after the tone.
Hey, I was looking for Calm Down Charlie. This is Mr. Dinah. Give us a call back there, Charlie. Oh, well, can't win them all. He's probably down in the basement raping puppies, I guess. So how many people believe she's in the fuel pool at the top of Reactor 4 to your left, 100 feet above the carnage you see right there? Anybody besides Calm Down Charlie believe that? Excuse me. La 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 la. I wanted to ask him, was she really in Reactor 4, right? Because he knows what he's going to say. Well, that's top secret. Done that one. So 60 kilometers away from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns is considered insane. So how bad is it at ground zero? More and more children complain of circulatory disturbances, tiredness, dizziness after Fukushima, because they won't move them out of the nuclear wasteland, right? So the poll is, are Japan's nuclear regulators evil monsters? Demonic demons, sadistic cowards, for letting kids go to school in Okuma's nuclear wasteland. And we got 100%, of course, Dana, and we thank you for that. Kids run marathons on streets with radioactivity 34,000 becquerels a square meter. Now, they're only talking about cesium-137 because that's kind of the scumbag the industry actually is. Children of Fukushima will be killed by the government. Someone please help. Well, I'm here trying, okay? And I've never stopped. Unfortunately, I don't see anybody else. I do see a lot of people originally that spoke out, but that was the end of it. And so we'll share a lot of that with you tonight. Radioactive cesium is causing holes in the hearts of children. At 11 becquerels a kilogram, you'll see that. You start to see holes in their hearts. Watch kids exercise on top of 120,000 becquerels a square meter. 55 becquerels a square meter at a nuclear plant pre-Fukushima was considered an evacuation zone. Japan professor on Fukushima and the media. The children are bleeding from the nostrils. They're suffering from skin diseases, cardiovascular diseases. Children. Because 11 becquerels a kilogram, that's what they'll see as cardiovascular diseases in the children. So rather than move the children out, they gave them dosimeters that they can't read, and they send away to universities. So pro-nuclear universities can study the children like lab rats, exactly like lab rats. And that means they're going to follow them for the rest of their lives. And if we know anything about the nuclear industry, their history when they start doing that is when the children die, they'll go take the body, dig it up after, and they'll bring it back to the States and incinerate it and sniff the air for radiation. Like they done for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, around 20,000 of them. Mother tells the official, lick the soil. Please lick it. Children lick the soil. Please take the soil in your hand and lick it after being told it doesn't need to be removed from the Fukushima nuclear wasteland. Children walking to school past Geiger counters. There's one city got 3,000. Fukushima City has 3,000 Geiger counters that only meant to measure in microsieverts instead of atomic decays, becquerels, which is what it's supposed to be. And the communities are surrounded by millions and millions and millions of one-ton bags at extraordinary numbers, but the Geiger counter only finds small numbers. Any idea what they're really up to? Any idea how actual evil you got to be just to even do that? Just that on its own? Just because you've done that on its own, the nuclear industry should be disbanded permanently. Kindergarten students play in dirt at school that was inside the Fukushima evacuation zone. So why are they bringing dirt from the evacuation zone to the kindergarten students at Minnesota City, which was 10 to 20 million becquerels a kilogram? You have to multiply by 64 to get a square meter. These are absurd numbers, by the way. And the acknowledgement is they picked up over 30 million bags. Some estimates was a lot more than that. But we know 30 million bags.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored.
60 million.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
that's Okuma. That's where the children are. 10% of the community is open up. The nuclear wasteland is open up. So, who the hell was so evil they thought that was a good idea? The only people that would do that, by the way, that we know in history is the nuclear industry. And this most likely was organized by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Because they're the puppet masters, right? Now, this is an appropriate statement. Woman from Fukushima's statement. It's as if they're in a gas chamber. They're breathing radiation every moment. That's a very, very, very appropriate statement. And that describes it perfectly. If the children are playing ball, if they do stay there overnight and they're playing ball in their garden, and the ball goes across the road, they can't go and retrieve it because it's too radioactive. How can the world media sit in silence? How can every academic in every university sit in silence? How can any academic in any discipline sit in silence? That's a question that terrifies me, by the way. Irreversible heart damage for children at 50 becquerels a kilogram. Let me put 50 becquerels a kilogram into perspective for you. I'm put 200 million becquerels on the head of a needle, which are, consider a becquerel an atom that pulses energy every second. That's considered a becquerel. I can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So if I take 50 of those atoms, do you think you can smell that or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up? You think you can pick up one of those atoms? You put 200 million on the head of a needle, you can't see it. It's a billion atoms to make the head of a needle. The very tip of the needle is a billion atoms. 50 of those atoms, children will see irreversible heart damage, like holes in their hearts and other stuff. I'm just going to show you this 12-year legacy of crimes they've already done, so you can appreciate why I'm a little tiny bit. I'm actually incredibly upset about this. It really offends me when they attack children like this. And even Japan, which has a 1,000-year history of abusing children, it's very difficult in Japan to get a rape conviction. Let's put it that way. And it's not an accident. Japan TV, children in area with radiation doses 10 times the annual limit. Well, how bad is it in the nuclear wasteland, in the no-go zone, where they magically claim 10% was safe when it can't be? Everything is airborne. You can't send children in there and expect there to be no adverse effects that are permanent. And that's just for 10 minutes. Imagine them sending them in every day to go to school. And now they're not living there. There's nobody, not a single person, nobody on the entire planet, 8 billion people, besides right here where you're going to hear this. There's not a single other, there's only 1 in 8 billion people that is talking about this subject. Saying there's only 1 in 8 billion that are, that are public. I know the people that are watching this are the same as me, but I'm just saying there's only 1 in 8 billion people that is putting out, asking the question, have we lost our minds? Have we lost our minds? How many news clips have you watched of child murderers that were caught? Lots, right? How many clips or news segments have you watched of children that were abused? Lots, right? Endless. This is the worst abuse imaginable because it's so easy to prove that it's abuse. It's a nuclear wasteland where they won't go themselves on top of that. So how can we have the whole world media not ask the question of, come on, right? This is crazy. Because they're bought and paid for. That's still 100% proof. There is nothing I can show you that is more definitive than the entire planet's silence of how controlled the media and universities and academics really are. I don't see Greenpeace out there speaking out. I don't see Arnie Gunnison out there speaking out, or Helen Caldicott, or Christopher Busby. I don't see any celebrities or superstars or sports actors or anybody speaking out. Fukushima girls with 3 times more thyroid tumors that are over 15 millimeters than boys. And 79% more medium-sized tumors than boys. These are tumors. Because the thyroid gland is 3 centimeters by 5 centimeters. And the numbers we see are 2 centimeters for the tumor. These are tumors. Right? They're trying to misrepresent it. Just like they say cripple when it's a nuclear meltdown. They misrepresent it, right? Single Tokyo war. Tokyo, 200 miles away. There's 13 schools with radiation levels above safety standards. 13 schools 200 miles away. So how bad is it at Ground Zero, which has been abandoned for over a decade and is still abandoned? Only 10% of the town is open up, but nobody lives there. They're going to build they built a school, they're building a school, and they're sending the kids to school, not at the school because it's not finished till another month or two. They're sending the school into the nuclear wasteland to the mayor's office building, right? So rather than wait another month or two for the school to be finished, well, we got to send the children in danger because the world thinks it's a nuclear wasteland. We got to prove it's not a nuclear wasteland by sacrificing all these children, because that's what it is. You're sacrificing all these children. And that industry is out there claiming to be your savior as we speak, by the way. I'm infuriated. I think the polls should have been tonight. Should the children grab onto the mayor and tear his head and arms off? And I bet you would have had the same amount of votes for sacrificing their loved ones and their children. Don't be a chicken, the mayor tells the parents who are concerned about the children are eating radioactive lunches. Don't be concerned. Don't be a chicken. Japanese doctor, children health problems are increasing. Incurable stomach aches, incurable chest pains, incurable nosebleeds that don't stop, incurable diarrhea that never goes away. Japanese mayor says students. And why is it we see the mayors are vicious scum? And why are they allowed to do that? How can they claim to be a human and do stuff like this? Japanese mayors say students are gaining knowledge by eating the radioactive food in school lunches. And this is a Kawasaki City mayor, for goodness sakes, quite far away. So how bad is it where they're sending the children tomorrow? 5 hospitals refuse to provide medical care to the children. We can't be seen by doctors when we want to be seen. It's just not right. It will be confusing, the doctor says, if our results is different from Fukushima Medical University, which is we covered hundreds and hundreds of times over the years, which is the center for the propaganda studies, right? The academics from Fukushima Medical University are producing academic studies claiming that it's safe. And I mean, Fukushima City is brutal radiation. It just shows you that the whole country is suffering from radioactive brain damage from the radiation fallout, right? That's a real thing, by the way. Children going past Geiger counters. Never in my life would I expect it that I would see today when I would see a picture of a child going past a Geiger counter, and which, by the way, there's huge numbers there. They're measuring it in microsieverts. The Geiger counter is not actually demonstrating. The community is full of 1-ton bags of 1 and 200. The typical number was minimum of 100,000 becquerels a kilogram, which are physical atoms. You're talking about an invisible snowstorm of atoms. You can't see the atoms, right? You don't understand that just breathing it in a little tiny bit is madness. Just breathing it in a little tiny bit is incredible madness. It's so hard for me to reconcile that picture actually exists. I know that makes me a bad person. Obviously, I'm a weirdo because I think it's wrong when everybody else thinks it's acceptable. Well, I'm only talking about the nuclear industry, obviously, right? But everybody in the nuclear industry thinks that it's acceptable to let children go to school in a nuclear wasteland. I can't. I just can't sit in silence. I'm not. I won't be able to sleep tonight if I sit in silence. Pregnant woman used for decontamination activity after Fukushima. Pregnant women used for decontamination activities. Can you imagine, like, nothing screams insane quite like nuclear. Nothing screams moron quite like nuclear. Local government testing school lunches after the children are already eaten. That's 33 of 59 municipalities. 59 municipalities were testing the lunches in the nuclear wasteland that are surrounded by Geiger counters that don't work to manipulate the children. But to move children back in within eyesight of the nuclear meltdown, Alice in Wonderland was used to convince the children in Japan nuclear power is safe. Right? Because they attack the children wherever they gather up throughout the whole country. The nuclear industry is everywhere. It officially now has infiltrated every facet of the country in order for the propaganda to exist, right? It has to infiltrate everything in the country. Every school, every university, every stadium, every public event, every radio, every TV, every newspaper. It has to infiltrate them all day, every day. For this to work, they have to be able to do propaganda 24/7. That's what they're doing, right? It's easier to pay all of those than it is to pay compensation or mediation. Nursery school children on contaminated playground equipment. The radiation is in the holes. Some kids with no dosimeters. Not that that matters, because the dosimeters goes to American universities and British. And masks not covering noses. The mask can't protect you from the radioactive fallout. Fukushima children not growing in weight. The average increases are down 75%. Doctors say it's very unusual. Some gained only 1 pound in a year. Imagine if your child only gained 1 pound in a year. There's a lot of children like that. Do they want to kill the children? Japan journalist, 2012. I can't forgive adults in Tokyo who are insane. I can't let it happen. People did protest. Journalists did speak out, but then they stopped or they got fired, right? Now it's total evilness. Children swim at Fukushima Beach as the ocean opened for the first time. This is 2012, for God's sakes. It was a massive nuclear wasteland in 2012. This was a hideous, there's still hideous amounts coming out of there in 2012. There still is today, certainly, but it was nasty. Just 0.8% of the children in 2001 Japanese control group had thyroid tumors. 36% now in the Fukushima study. That's 2012. Because there's so much radiation. There was 865,000 extra cancers diagnosed in 2012. Cesium had tripled the government level, and that's just, cancer is just one of 1,800 diseases. Cesium had tripled the government limits on radioactive compost made by elementary school children using fallen leaves. Children. This is Tokyo Elementary School. So Tokyo obviously should be abandoned. 36 million people. A Tokyo professor, cesium detected in the urine of Fukushima infants definitely has no effect on the human body. Well, but of course it does. Your body attacks every single atom for the rest of your life. with white blood cells. That's an effect, right? It's going to try to build a tumor around it over the next couple of decades. And it has to displace red blood cells that are carrying oxygen and nutrition in order to do that. For every white blood cell created, it has to displace a red blood cell. And that's permanent. You do that. It's not like it's going to heal after 7 days like a cut on your finger and go back to normal red blood cell count. No. Right now, they currently got children going to school that don't live there in a nuclear wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear reactors that have melted down, 4 of them, and 8 fuel pools that blew up or melted down. And the fuel pool would have decades of reactor cores. And 2 kilometers away from that, after 12 years of constant fallout, with 14 million one-ton bags in the community, and who knows what else they're storing there from the nuclear meltdown, because they are. They got and 10% of the community is open to sending children to school. How the hell did we ever lose our way? Or did we ever have our way, I wonder? But how did we become this bad? Six in 10 Fukushima children tested of diabetes. And you're going to send children in 2 kilometers from nuclear meltdowns and not expect no adverse effects? That's Okuma. In Japan, residents in Tokyo area samples cesium gamma signal, Tokyo, 200 miles away, is so strong you can't identify the other isotopes. So how do they identify tritium when it's going to be polluted with all the other isotopes? You can't, right? It's a complete fable. It's absurd to suggest the bags are only full of tritium or cesium. For every cesium-137, there's 100 strontium-90s produced. A much powerful single, more powerful beta single. It ends up in your bones. First it burns a hole through your lung, goes in your bones. And for children, it mutates the stem cells. And putting children alongside of nuclear meltdowns because the radiation mutates their stem cells is 1,000 times more evil again, right? And because they know this. It's not like they don't know what I'm showing you on top of that. So imagine how evil the mayor actually is. Japan residents in Tokyo area sample. The signal is so strong you can't identify any other isotopes. And one of the weakest ones is tritium, but it's still a nasty emitter. But they're trying to brainwash you thinking that tritium is the biggest byproduct. There is no longer any such thing as clean and safe food. That's one of the very rare statements that are true. After radiation from Fukushima nuclear disaster meltdowns spread around planet Earth, people who advance nuclear power should be made to eat the extremely contaminated items. Well, way to go! That's awesome. Thank you. That was like eating a piece of chocolate cake that time. Children playing on dirt with huge amounts of radioactivity, including alpha particles. Cesium levels so high prevented identification of other isotopes. Which is insane to even... Which is not true, obviously, right? They're just trying to promote cesium. There's a lot there, obviously. Where the biggest byproduct is curium isotopes, not cesium. And you need lead shielding 20 times thicker for plutonium or curium than you do for plutonium. Plutonium is much more energetic than cesium. Worse than radioactive rain, after Fukushima fallout was suspended near the Earth's surface without settling down, says a new study, potentially a health risk, especially for children as they breathe air close to the ground. Which is, the children now are right at the nuclear meltdown going to school each day. Being 2 kilometers away in a nuclear wasteland where 90% of it is a no-go zone with 14 million one-ton bags of radiation, is the equivalent of a nuclear wasteland. Probably one of the worst equivalents on top of that. Like the scariest. Watch, babies born this year will be working at Fukushima Daiichi one day. Well, the children that are going to school weren't alive when Fukushima melted down. So what is it with this industry, the nuclear industry, loves sacrificing children? I don't have the radiation meter up in the corner because I can't use graphics. I won't be able to have radioactive fallout if I have a meter, because it takes up the same pane, right? And if I want to bring in the external, right, I'm limited, right? So I sometimes have to make a decision of the Geiger counter is still here, still running. It's 175 counts per minute there right now. I can bring it up for you. So I can't do the graphics and have the Geiger counter too. Because the Geiger counter, I got to make the window really small to fit up in the corner up here. But then I have to expand the whole window to get the graphics to work, right? And then how do I make it small enough to fit the Geiger counter back up in the corner? Sorry about that. I'm on YouTube. Scumbag censor YouTube. What a disgusting... that they let the nuclear industry actually censor me in real time. Here's one of the people from the nuclear industry right now. Hello, scumbag. I don't know why Calm Down Charlie didn't call me back. Babies born this year may be working at Fukushima Daiichi one day. So we got viewers all over the world. Now, it might not reflect in the actual count, right? Because the trolls got me censored. But that doesn't mean we're not watching. It just means it's not reflected. The thumbs up and stuff like that won't show up because they control those digital cues, right? So Spider-Man, the Hulk, and the rest of them were created to manipulate you and your loved ones in increments, like the Simpsons and the rest of them. And the average person, you can't even talk to them. And if you like Simpsons and you belittle Simpsons, they get offended. Not able to rationalize that there's more to life than a cartoon, right? Babies born this year may be working at Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Not maybe, will be. School had children clean up highly contaminated. I'm just showing you this legacy of the nuclear hate industry, the degenerate nuclear industry's abuse of the most vulnerable of society. School had children clean up highly contaminated area and relocate the dirt without telling the parents. So imagine how freaking weird they are that the teachers would actually go to Okuma. The teachers are so stupid they don't even understand they're going to be breathing in the radiation too. Imagine that you can actually get a teaching degree and be that stupid. It's very confusing for me because this is not hard to wrap your mind around this stuff. You don't have to be a genius to know that it's stupid to be within eyesight of a nuclear meltdown surrounded by 14 million one-ton bags where only 10% of the community is open to people and no one chooses to live there because it's a nuclear wasteland. It should never have been. And then they got a school there. Like, my God, boy. And Minnesota official, the children are the sacrifices. That's 100% accuracy. Because the children don't know any better, so they're the perfect victims for the nuclear industry. That's what the nuclear industry loves to destroy them, right? Because they can't fight back. Not going to do it teenagers. Teenagers might figure it out and kick the shit out of them. The businesses forces the mayors to keep the children here, 25 kilometers from Fukushima Daiichi, which is 10 there's communities 35, 40 kilometers away that are still no-go zones, but they got children within 2 kilometers. I think the parents should tear the head off the mayor of that town right away. Who's going to convict him? Alpha radiation detected on school streets in Minnesota, which is far, far away compared to the children that are going to school 2 kilometers. That's Okuma right there. Japanese medical experts deeply concerned about the children's radiation exposure. 2012, 51% of the children contaminated with cesium. So when you want to acknowledge cesium and call yourself, it's absurdness to only acknowledge cesium. Some had clothing indicating high levels of gamma radiation, or gamma rays. Even worse, actual fuel particulates. Japanese TV professor detects 104 microsievers near where kids walk to school. An absurd reality where children are right next to high-level contamination. But they're sending children into a nuclear wasteland to go to a nuclear radioactive school surrounded by no-go zones and millions of one-ton bags of radiation. I can't believe that that's real, see? But it is. And we got a lot of proof showing you similar stuff, right? Tokyo official blasts parents who want kids to avoid ingesting radioactivity at school. It's important to share the pain. City assemblyman in Tokyo to school children. Don't be egos. Eat your school lunches to share the pain. This is about 40 kilometers away, but the children are at the nuclear meltdown as we speak. Can you wrap your mind around this statement? I can't wrap my mind around it. Where's the men in Fukushima? Where's the men, rather, in Japan? How come the other question is, how come there's no men in Japan? Because there can't be men that will let children, and these parents should be arrested for child abuse for bringing their children, because this is from today's pictures, right, from Okuma. Japanese lawmaker, 180,000 students may have eaten radioactive beef. 13,000 becquerels a kilogram served. I'm ashamed of myself that people like that are allowed to exist, right? Because this is Okuma you're looking at. None of the stuff you got there can protect them, by the way. This is one of the homeless and the victims of society. Japan blog author claims medical workers say malformed babies are being declared as stillbirths or miscarriages, not included in statistics. 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible lesions for adults. So children are 100 times more vulnerable. And the children are going to school in a nuclear wasteland surrounded by millions of becquerels a kilogram. High radioactivity found at all schools 30 kilometers from Tokyo, which is, say, 170 miles away. So sending children into ground zero. So that was a picture they published today of children. Look at their so-called pom-poms. Celebrating children going into a nuclear wasteland. Children don't know any better, right? The mayor and the adults and the journalists and the universities and academics and of all disciplines are supposed to be outraged and speaking out. No, not a word. Nothing worldwide. And then the only ones that's having a conversation, I'm not allowed to have any viewers on my program. Because I'm not wrapping shit on a stick and calling it fertilizer, right? Nowhere is safe. Cesium levels in Yokohama mushrooms reached 300,000 becquerels a kilogram. It's 250 kilometers away from the meltdowns. And is already eaten by hundreds of children under the age of 12. And so this is not complacent. This is, they're poisoning the children on purpose. They don't want Japan to survive. The leaders of Japan hate the children, right? Obviously. The schools hate the children. The nuclear industry despises children. That's one thing we've learned over the years. They despise children with every fiber in their body, the pro-nuclear do. Pro-nuclear won't send their children to those schools, I can guarantee you. 8-year-old girl with 3,000 disintegrations of radioactive cesium every second inside her body. German government study. Children living near nuclear plants have double leukemias. So imagine being around a nuclear meltdown. High incidences of solid cancers. The reactors that are not melted down can't prevent the radiation from escaping. And then the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment from all fuel pools worldwide. And so last night that we covered the fuel pools in our polls. These are genocide machines, right? 4 microsieverts per hour at a primary school in Tokyo, 200 miles away. And they're sending children into a nuclear wasteland to prop up the nuclear industry, and the whole world sits in silence and calls themselves heroes. The people that are sent to me are getting $20 an hour, so they can, and all they do is murder all these children, right? So the people sent to me are mass murderers. History clearly shows they're mass murderers. They're just too coward to do it themselves, that's all, right? And so rather than try to help the children, they took a job for a paycheck to censor anybody that is trying to help them. Imagine how stupid you got to be to take that job. Can you imagine what kind of weirdo you actually got to be to get that job? Japan media yet to mention radioactive baseball fields in Tokyo, 200 miles away. 4 times Chernobyl contaminated levels. And the parents and kids are clueless. Children walking past millions of 1-ton bags of radiation is not something we should ever be talking about. It should never ever be possible, not even conceivable. But that's how much the industry does this on purpose, to poison everything and everybody. And if you don't fight back, guess what? Everybody's going to be poisoned. Every species, every insect, every animal will disappear. And you only had this one opportunity to fight back. This is your only opportunity. This is your moment to shine if you're an academic or a scientist or a journalist and you abrogated it. Increasing numbers of horrified parents in Tokyo area as young children enjoy radioactive autumn outdoors. They wouldn't even let the children in Tokyo go outdoors for the first couple of years. Accused of being monster parents if they're concerned. Well, journalists are monsters. Are Japanese nuclear regulators evil monsters for letting kids go to school in Okuma's nuclear wasteland? And it's one of the worst nuclear wastelands we've ever seen in history, period. Tokyo, cesium tripled government limits in radioactive compost made by elementary school children using fallen leaves. And some of these headlines you might see twice because they shocked me. It's a sin just to use them once. Nursery school are taking field trips so kids can play in areas with less radioactivity. Just think about that statement. Nursery schools are taking field trips so kids can play in areas with less radioactivity. 800% higher radiation doses at the school. Talk about nursery schools. So if the journalists and the mayors and the police and the think tanks and the organizations like Greenpeace and everybody else are not going to speak out for the children, and I don't do it, that means nobody done it. So I got to do it. How do I not do it, see? Because I know all this stuff, right? And so when I see a headline, they're sending kids into this nuclear wasteland, all of this is bashing in my head all the time. And if I don't come out and make a video and at least say something, there's no way I'm going to sleep. You know, and I'm compelled to say something anyway, don't get me wrong, but because it's so wrong, it drives me so insane, I can't get it off my brain at all. I have to say something. I can't just have it eating at my soul all day and all night. I won't be able to sleep. Thyroid problems found, but apparently that makes me a terrible person, of course, and you, if you're concerned. Thyroid problems in children from Fukushima, 60% of them are from the outside evacuation zone. They only evacuated a fraction of the radioactive wasteland. They should have evacuated 14 prefectures, because the food was banned by 55 countries for a decade. Mother finds 20 times higher radioactivity than normal in child's bedroom, in the bedroom. The national government and TEPCO kept saying it's all right, and I believed them. So that house is supposed to be taken to a nuclear, torn down, taken to a, supposed to put a temporary sarcophagus around it, take it down, and then move it to a nuclear holding site for thousands of years. But TEPCO is the last person should be saying anything, right? And the reason they use TEPCO is so you don't yell at the nuclear industry and the nuclear universities. And I covered this before, I'll cover it again. Wall Street Journal, officials sharply raised radiation levels for residents to get the iodine pills after the meltdown, 75 times higher than was recommended for children, 75 times higher than what it was. Yeah, we had a nuclear accident, but we raised the limit. What is it, double, triple? No. Well, what is it? Well, it's higher. Well, what is it? It's 75 times higher. What? 75 times higher. So, it's like saying your kid got all A's in school, right? And they want to go to university. They got perfect A's, 100% on every report card their whole life. And they want to go to university. And the university said, well, no, they got to get a 75 times higher grade. And you're like, well, they can't get a 75 times higher grade because that's the highest grade you can get. So just the original number was too high. There shouldn't be any iodine pills. You should be evacuated, is the best way to put it. The iodine pills can't save you. If you're taking iodine pills, you're supposed to evacuate permanently, never go back to. They might, you're supposed to take the iodine pills 24, 48 hours before the nuclear reactor melts down, by the way. And they raised it 75 times higher. So why would they raise it 75 times higher when we know the country is incredibly radioactive? There's no maybes about it. The air in Tokyo was 270 times nuclear weapons testing follow peak, for instance. It was 220 million atoms, just iodine-129 per liter of rainfall in Canada from an Ottawa study. Nuclear radiation, by the way, is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Radioactive fallout is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Hey, I got a great idea. Let's send children into the nuclear meltdown, 2 kilometers, where we got all the nuclear waste stored, and we'll open up 10% of the town. And they can go to school where they're already 100 kilometers away. But why do that? Let's send them, bus them 100 kilometers to go to school in nuclear wasteland. And then the other guy sitting at the table at TEPCO or Fukushima or Japan's government is like, that's pretty evil. Let's do it. Japan doesn't care about children anyway. Never did, right? It sees children as sex objects, for God's sakes. Nuclear radiation, the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Every nuclear academic, as soon as they become a nuclear scientist, should have that tattooed on their forehead. Nuclear radiation, most carcinogenic thing that exists. And then it should be dropped in a wood chipper. 75% of Fukushima 300,000 children going to school so contaminated would be radiation control areas at nuclear plants. Well, they stepped up their evil. Now they're sending children 100 kilometers by bus into a nuclear wasteland where only 10% of the town is open, with 14 million one-ton bags and oodles of waste from the nuclear meltdown itself that has been abandoned for over a decade. No one lives there. Hey, let's send children there. Nobody else will go there. They can't say no, they're children. How evil are you when you do that? Just for that reason alone, everybody in the nuclear industry should be thrown off a cliff. And not a short cliff either. School playground staircases radiation 70 times the maximum allowed, far, far, far away from the evacuation zone, equal to 69,000 microsieverts per year. Microsievert like 150 kilometers per minute. So you're breathing, drinking, eating 24/7 radioactive fallout. You can't avoid a single breath of air without breathing in radiation. Why are we tolerating this? Why are we sitting in silence? South of Tokyo, 12,400 becquerels a kilogram. Not microsieverts, not millisieverts, but becquerels per kilogram. A radioactive cesium next to a children's swimming pool. This is on the other side of Tokyo, away from Fukushima, by the way. The measurements nearly doubled over the recent 5-day period. Now, because whenever you hear cesium, you got to assume there's 1,000 other fission products in the same sample, so you got to multiply by at least 600. Whatever number they give you. It's a nuclear wasteland on top of it. You can't go anywhere without breathing. You can't take a single breath without breathing it in. But to send children into the nuclear meltdown, where the nuclear meltdown is, to go to a school that even today doesn't exist for another couple of months maybe. I can't wrap my mind around it. How do you get that evil? I've seen a lot of evil in nuclear, but this is a whole new level of evil. All 10 children tested in a large city 60 kilometers from multiple nuclear meltdowns of radioactive urine. High possibility the children in and near the city is exposed to internal radiation. High possibility. 50,000 becquerels a kilogram of radioactive cesium in the soil near Tokyo. Becquerels per kilogram. It's terrifying. The sample was from the side of the street where children walk every day. Well, 50,000 becquerels a kilogram. As I was walking. You got to multiply 50,000 by 64. We're going short to get a square meter. So 3.2 million becquerels, where the children are walking, airborne, where the children are walking per square centimeter. So every time they take 2 steps, there's another 3,200 becquerels pulsing energy every second that they're going to breathe in. But the Geiger counter says it's safe, so there you go, Dana. Now we're only talking about cesium on top of that. That's a whole level of evil that I can't reconcile. I can't. I can't wrap my mind around this level of evilness. If I was in Japan, I would have killed about 4,000 pro-nuclear by right now with my bare hands. I would have separated their head from their bodies by now. You're pro-nuclear, boom! Tear their head right off their body, kick it down the road till I find another one. Because they're not going to be scared away by you kicking a head down the road because they're nuclear, right? They don't have any emotions. Japan's nuclear agency hides children's radiation results. Anybody surprised? Radioactive iodine in 50% of the children's thyroid, up to 35 millisieverts. These are absurd numbers, by the way. La, la. As I was walking this madness. 35,000 microsieverts. So let's do some math again, because that's always fun. We're going to downplay what a microsiever is. We're going to call 35,000 microsieverts and call a microsiever 150 counts per minute. It's 5.2 million counts per minute in their thyroid, which means there's 5.2 million atoms in their thyroids. So each atom is pulsing energy every second or so at the speed of light. Now, there's so much there that it's going to get moved out of the thyroid and converted into a hormone. So now you got radioactive hormones being produced by children. But when you're talking about this much in a child, then that also means that their bones now are saturated, so they're mutating their stem cells. And this is true, of course, for all the insects and birds and mammals and animals and everything else. And so we all, we got all these people out there saying how despicable it is for monsters to attack children. But then you got Japan, that's all they do is attack children and nobody's speaking out. Got all these fake heroes, right, in the media, but we got no real ones. Let me see. After cleanup, the high school was 7.9 microsieverts an hour, and the daycare was 7. You can't measure it in microsieverts though. You got to, because that's not what it's not microsieverts. It's got to be measured in the physical atoms, because that's what they're breathing in. Right, that's what they're breathing in. And these Geiger counters can't find nothing. Compared to what's actually there, I should say. Nursery school, Geiger counter nearly off the scale near the play equipment. The topsoil had already been replaced. So topsoil has already been replaced. Hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to irradiated school playgrounds with Geiger counters strapped to their chests. It's unthinkable, it's unconscionable, right? It's normal though. With the nuclear industry, they don't care about you. They don't care about them. They don't care about any species. They just want to kill everything. That's obvious. There's nothing else that makes any sense. The only thing that makes sense is they want to kill everything, and that's what they're doing. It was Arthur Guthrie, right? This land is our land. I got this version, Neil Young's version, stuck in my head. I apologize for that. That should have never happened. When you heard me humming there. Because I was trying it on the guitar, and now it's stuck in my head. And once I get it, I'll be okay. But until I get it, I was trying to do the picking, right? I just done Sea Shanty. The Wellerman, right? Was the name of the song, but other people call it the Sea Shanty. I just figured out all the picking for that one. So I got that one off my head. Oh, God. Of all songs, this land is my land, this land is your land. And it's only because of the Neil Young version, right? Because I got a CD with Neil Young just doing cover songs. And I put it in the CD player in the truck. I didn't even look at it because I got like a whole stack of CDs, right? I never ever used a radio in my truck. And I'll just pull up 10 or 20 and pull out a disc and drop it back on the pile and stick the disc in. I won't even look at it to see what it is. And so that's been in the CD for a few days. And if I go out, that's the one that gets... I never dreamt I would be singing that song or humming it. My apologies. 6.4 microsieverts per hour detected outskirts of Tokyo, 200 miles away, just a few meters away from children on the playground. So you see all this concern about children, all these headlines where they're concerned about children. But now all of a sudden they're not concerned. The children are right at a nuclear meltdown site itself. Because the first couple of years there was some blowback, but not much, but there was some. School playground staircase at 70 times the maximum allowed, 69 millisieverts a year. Part of the school playground declared off limit after 0.25 microsieverts an hour. So 0.25 microsieverts was off limits. So 69,000 microsieverts is not. That's 200 kilometers southeast of the Fukushima. Children and staff must wear hats and gargle regularly. Well, wearing hats and gargling is not going to protect you from radioactive fallout. And so whoever said they should gargle should have been beat to death with baseball bats. Or thrown in the reactor 3 or something, right? And pick up the fuel rod. When he drops dead, the next nuclear apologist picks up the fuel rod and runs with it, right? These are despicable monsters. These are mass murderers. I have zero remorse, zero compassion for these people. These are parasites that should be wiped off our planet. Pro-nuclear is nothing but a parasite. It's a vicious, hateful, dangerous parasite that has to be eradicated at some point. Or you're eradicated. If you don't get rid of them, they're going to kill everything. They're well on the way on top of that. They are at war against you. You need to go to war against them. Radiology expert finds up to 45 microsieverts per hour in their school zone. There's 1,000 microsieverts in a millisievert. This is 90 times higher than the Chernobyl evacuation threshold, by the way. 45 microsieverts. So half a microsievert is considered an evacuation zone. Then Japan, South Korea, China, Canada, United States should be evacuated. Prime Minister, former advisor, government worsened the radiation exposure and says the thyroid cancer expected in children in Fukushima and nearby prefectures. It's not just cancer, there's 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Tokyo, 230,000 becquerels per square meter of cesium. Of course, notice how you hear cesium over and over and over and over and over and over and over. You think that's an accident? You think there's only cesium comes out of a nuclear meltdown? You got any idea how evil it is to do this? 6 times as high as limits set for radiation control zones. You can't find nothing on the children though, but everything else is radioactive. Government's answer to protecting children in Fukushima from radioactive fallout: wear long-sleeve shirts while at school. It's NHK Media, by the way. Japan's safety standards and radiation levels for children are unconscionable. Look up the word unconscionable. Maybe you'll... If you're pro-nuclear, look up the word unconscionable so you can understand how evil you actually are, will you? Parts of the school playground declared off limit at a quarter microsievert. Oh, that's right, quarter microsievert. It should be atomic decays per second. They refuse to put a number on it, so they call it microsievert. See? Radioactive rain causes 130 schools in Korea to close. Rain in California was 220 million atoms per liter. It was way more than 10 times. Over 30 million permanently affected by Fukushima radiation. 14,000 square kilometers heavily contaminated, millions, including kids and infants, being exposed all day, every second of every minute. You get sick and die. SOS from local official, I can't take it anymore. The black dust is over 5.5 million becquerels a kilogram. So you got to multiply that by 64 to get a square meter. They're going to do what? Spring athlete meets? Swimming pool openings? IAEA admits there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation. And they admit that the standards that they're using is based on bananas and potato chips, not uranium and plutonium daughters like americium, ruthenium, strontium, etc., right? In other words, they're based on natural instead of man-made. So there's no reason that they should exist. They should be in jail for all the crimes that they've committed by pretending that they had a standard. They should be, everybody that ever participated in the International Atomic Energy Agency should be prosecuted. Should lose any degrees they got immediately. At some point, the world will be just like me. Because you got no choice, eh? Can't have a future by pretending this is not happening. I like it. It's truly like I'm in the Twilight Zone. It's all 100%. Which is probably why they use the Twilight Zone. You remember the old Windows operating system, the new ones? When you first fired it up, it would play the Twilight Zone. A little clip of the Twilight Zone would, a little part of the Twilight Zone would play. That's from the 1959 series, right? I'm talking about. Japan's chief cabinet secretary last one told about children's radiation concern. Laughs. No laughing matter, said the lawmaker. Well, they laugh because that's their reflex. It's not like they don't know what they're doing. It's not like they don't know that they're evil. And they do it for a paycheck is what frightens the shit out of me. Fukushima kids playing above nuclear waste. Public parks are now unmarked radioactive dumps. This was a kid wrote can't remember, like 8 or 9 years old kid, and then they took a picture of him, posted online. Hello, my name is Akane Yamagudin. I'm from Fukushima, Japan. I want to be a nurse because I want to help sick people. I had to study English. I have to study English every day. I want to be a nurse so I can help sick people because they're surrounded by sick people because of Fukushima. Everybody's sick. Despicable UN committee chairman. The committee chairman of UN studying Fukushima. UN, the person in charge of studying Fukushima, says we wouldn't expect to see health effects in children, workers, or anyone else from nuclear meltdowns. So what is their purpose anyway? The IAEA is based on bananas and potato chips, which is UN, right? The UN committee chairman says they wouldn't expect any adverse side effects from a nuclear, they're surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of radiation. But there's not going to be no health effects, Dana. Why are you putting it in bags for? Well, there's not going to be no health effects, Dana. Well, why are you checking the kids for? Well, there's not going to be no health effects because we're never going to admit to it. Why do you got useless Geiger counters, 3,000 in just one community, rather than evacuate them? Really, why do they do that kind of stuff, right? Because they don't want to evacuate them. Their nature is evil. They have no redeeming qualities. Man from Fukushima chokes up to children are radioactive. People that stayed are in denial. We receive hate mail for leaving. That's called Stockholm syndrome, right? Nuclear radiation, top cancer doctor. Nuclear radiation, the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Just bringing a single atom can trigger an autoimmune illness, right? There's 1,800 of them. Smalling mascot asked Fukushima kids to gargle to stay safe from radiation. And radioactive sparkles unhappy children. This is what I mean. The children can't go anywhere without brutal brain, and they got these caricatures to use, right? You see the kid gargling? If you're using a Geiger counter and it's registering numbers where children are too, and you're in a nuclear wasteland, you have lost the plot. 179 microsieverts per hour in elementary school. A quarter microsiever is considered an evacuation zone, by the way. Hot spots at the bus stop, main gate, schoolyards, pool, gym. In other words, you're in a nuclear wasteland, right? And you're pretending you're not. Lecturer tells parents Tokyo radiation is not so serious, and to let the children play outdoors. Just gargle and wash your hands. Right? So you've seen this pattern of gargle. If you were going to university and you were trying to get a nuclear degree, and for your final paper you said all you got to do to decontaminate radioactive wasteland is to gargle, you'll actually probably pass. You don't have to write anything else on the test. Just tell the victims to gargle and they'll be safe. And the professor will be, oh my God, you're a god. I got people want to hire you right now. They're going to pay you triple you can get anywhere else. How can you pretend that the children don't matter? Japan, how does that work? Kids run marathons in streets with radioactivity, 134,000 becquerels a square meter. Children of Fukushima will be killed by the government. Someone please help. Well, I'm here doing the best I can for you. I know it's not much, but I'm doing the best I can. It shows the effects of plutonium on the lung tissue. A single particle causes a tumor. Now, a tumor could take 30 or 40 years to manifest, or 10 years, but it's definitely going to show up, which means your immune system is compromised that whole time. We need outside help. Japanese people are not listening. Fukushima doctor. We're now in very bad condition, especially for the children. Please help. Well, I'm doing the best I can for you folks. I haven't forgot about you. Let me tell you that. I haven't forgot about you. My heart is broken every day. And every day I go to war for you and your loved ones and every species on this planet. And you know, I just had 3 heart attacks, for God's sakes. 7 stents put in. And my only thought was, how do I get back and curb stomp the nuclear industry? Thank goodness I can do that. I'm so grateful that I can do that again. Is iodine-131 killing babies in Philadelphia? It's, 6,000 miles away. So imagine how bad it is 2 kilometers from the nuclear meltdown where they just sent kids back to go to school. Deaths up 48% since radiation levels spiked in tap water. It was not just iodine-131. They only said iodine-131 because he doesn't want you to evacuate the United States, which is what you should have done. No, you're all safe. Go back to school. Inhaling just 1 hot particle can cause a cancer, but there's 1,800 other diseases. So imagine insects and birds and animals and mammals. Japanese doctor, children's health problems are increasing. Incurable stomach aches, chest pains, nosebleeds that don't stop, diabetes or diarrhea. Before Fukushima, 100 becquerels a kilogram of cesium was nuclear waste. After 100 becquerels a kilogram of nuclear safe to eat. The limit was 0.1 becquerel per kilogram. And that's just because they had 54 reactors in Japan. You couldn't get away from releases anyway, right? Letting children hang out in a nuclear wasteland, give them fake Geiger counters. That's a whole different level of evil. And the people who made the Geiger counter should be tossed out of a plane. 43% of kids have thyroid abnormalities in the new Fukushima City test results. 43% of the children. Up to 4 times more in females and 2 to 3 times larger. Top radiation experts, 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans, adults, lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. I don't think the world is going to survive what they're doing. But, because we don't have any resistance, right? Well, I'll do my part. Or hell or high water, I'll be doing my part. 23% higher incidences of childhood leukemia within 60 kilometers of a nuclear power plant. United States University. Cancer is just one of 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that will manifest. After Chernobyl, was over 3 million children. Chernobyl is a paper towel compared to Fukushima, and Chernobyl was brutal, but Chernobyl was nothing compared to the inventory was lost at Fukushima. 3 million children require treatment because of Chernobyl. Well, that's permanent. Many will die prematurely. That's permanent, right? Under 3% of the children exposed to Chernobyl radiation while in the womb were diagnosed as healthy at the age of 7. So 97 out of 100 weren't healthy when they were born and after. A study out of Japan was 38,100. There was 13,646 children had thyroid tumors of 5 centimeters or 2 centimeters. 1 in every 3 children had tumors. So the thyroid, the tumors of 2 centimeters or less. Because they want to cover up and call it cysts and nodules or whatever. So 5 centimeters by 3 centimeters is the gland. And that the tumors were 2 centimeters or less. So 2 centimeters is a massive tumor of something that's only 3 centimeters by 5, right? Pre-Fukushima, the numbers were 1 in a million, by the way. 1 in a million. Human embryos, United States, likely bioaccumulating radioactive iodine, cesium, strontiums, americium, plutonium. Over 35% of young people tested of thyroid tumors. Thyroid tests for under 18 in 13 cities. You gotta be pretty evil to be pro-nuclear, is all I can tell you. You gotta be pretty disconnected to be a pro-nuclear. As far as I can tell, and I've been at this a very long time, pro-nuclear is anti-life, anti-human, anti-species. Fukushima girls have 3 times more thyroid tumors than boys. 79% more large tumors than boys. 79% more large tumors than boys. In a nuclear wasteland. So girls are much more vulnerable. That's why I say regularly we got to protect the female species of the entire planet, of all species, right? Thyroid abnormalities in 55% of the Fukushima girls tested aged 11 to 15. These are tumors, right? Once they start, they never stop growing. Really? Tumors in a nuclear wasteland? Never would have figured that one out. Total shock to me, really. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram in a nuclear wasteland. Now, boy. So you can't really get the true number with a Geiger counter or even close to it, but if you get a number then that means you should evacuate immediately. Children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, again, because they only acknowledge cesium, just want to pull the head off somebody in the nuclear industry and play soccer with it, start to see heart problems. Idaho TV, data showed a large spike in deaths, particularly infant deaths, in the 14 weeks following Fukushima. That was just a study area. It doesn't mean it stopped after 14 weeks. It was just, they were showing in that 14 weeks there was a statistical increase. Infant deaths were also up in BC, Canada, collaborating that U.S. study, right? And a peer-reviewed study showed 14,000 U.S. deaths in the first couple of months after Fukushima. And she died last year, I think, or the year before, the lead scientist in that study. And she was amazing, actually. When you look at her history, she was absolutely amazing. Again, can you imagine how evil you are? You got multiple nuclear meltdowns, detonations, you got fuel pools blowing up in each building, double fuel pools in each building blowing up, and you raise the level for children to get iodine pills by 75 times, and you're only checking for cesium on top of that. That's a level of evil I've never encountered before. That's a level of, holy shit, actual demonic monsters, actual demons, eh? No, you're okay. Go to school. Child's risk of cancer is 100 times, so all children should be evacuated immediately, right? Shake your head like that. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. That's why all the children should be evacuated immediately. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions, so you got to evacuate all the humans too, because you can't avoid those numbers. 45 microsieverts an hour at a nearby school. That's okay. Let's give the children dosimeters. Don't evacuate them, so we can study them like lab rats. That's that's nuclear. If you want to see evil, you got to look no further than nuclear. You want to see heartless and scumbags and degenerates? You got to go no further than nuclear. And the children in Okuma, that's what they got to look at each day. There's 14 million of them one-ton bags in Okuma, and only 10% of the town is open. Can't stop the car on the way home or the way to school. You can't live there, but you drop your kids off to go to school. Japan's a wasteless society, right? It's a pointless, rather, society. Japan shouldn't actually exist. The nuclear industry absolutely has no right to exist after all of this. No right. There's no such thing as a good pro-nuclear. There's no such thing as a good nuclear company. There's no way they're not monsters. You can't be in the industry unless you're an absolute hideous monster, but you look like you're a human, right? Medical experts, Japan's safety standards and radiation levels for children are unconscionable. They're unconscionable. Nursery school Geiger counter nearly off the scale near play equipment. Topsoil was already replaced. 27,000 becquerels a kilogram, 200 kilometers from the meltdowns in the kindergarten. By the way, if the Geiger counter encounters a high number, you'll break the Geiger counter. So now it's no longer functional. These people don't even know what they're doing on top of that, because we've covered that for many years. Parts of the school playground cleared off limb because 0.25 microsieverts an hour, 200 kilometers away. Telling the children should gargle. Whenever someone says the children should gargle, they should take a hot piece of metal, like at 2,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and drop it down their throat. Hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school playgrounds. We got to go back to the medieval times to discourage the nuclear industry from exterminating us. Is the only thing that makes sense. And that's just terrifying that we even got to talk like this. But if you understand what they're actually doing to all the children and all the humans and all the animals and insects, you'll be exactly like me. And I'm pretty polite compared to what's coming. Hard to imagine something more frightening. 5-year-olds going to a nuclear wasteland and not being evacuated, but instead sending them to the schools, to the nuclear wastelands. Like George Orwell couldn't have envisioned this. Toyo tea leaves at 2,700 becquerels a kilogram, picked by elementary school students. School playgrounds at 70 times the maximum allowable limits. High school is incredibly radioactive. 75% of the Fukushima children going to 300,000 children going to schools. There should be controlled areas in nuclear plants, would be nuclear wastelands. Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home, get rid of their clothing, take showers, and get it off your body. If you've got radioactive fallout, you should shave your head right away too, because your hair is going to be completely contaminated. Adult volunteers, and you'll when you get showers and you do your laundry and everything else, that's going to get everything else contaminated. See? Adult volunteer Japanese students for decontamination contaminated areas, mounds of disaster debris. Outbreak of cancer is underway in Fukushima children. Clear evidence of an epidemic. All of Japan is exposed to nuclear radiation. Even the bags now where plants are growing out of them, so endless radioactive pollen throughout the country and from the bags themselves. The bags were only meant to last 2 years, right? Fukushima radiation is killing the children, heart problems, leukemias, thyroids. Terrible things are going on. The authorities are hiding the truth from the world. We need to admit many people are dying, but we're not allowed to say it. I hear you, man. Many young people who are in high school have died suddenly in Fukushima. Officials ignore all the problems. Former mayor, people are always told any disease they have is not caused by radiation in a nuclear wasteland. Stop fear-mongering, you little bastard. That's what they're saying to the kids, right? I already hear reports of kids suffering heart attacks, children having heart attacks. Beware deadly cardiac problems in children caused by Fukushima radiation. Yeah, we'll get holes in their hearts, right? Man from Fukushima chokes up. The children are radioactive. People that stayed are in denial. University of Pittsburgh radiation expert. Child cancer risk doubles if exposed to just a couple of x-rays worth of radiation during pregnancy. Oh, there's 1,800 diseases, not just cancer. German government study. Children living near nuclear plants have double leukemias. 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans, irreversible lesions. 43% of kids have thyroid abnormalities. In a new study, this one of the most absurd pictures in history is Geiger counters at children's playgrounds, right? Like the playgrounds are inside, and the communities past the playgrounds are evacuated. Thyroid cancer risk lasts your entire life, by the way. How did we get so heartless? How did that ever happen? Evidence linking nuclear plants to ill health increasingly compelling. It's clear something is going on. UK government blames unidentified virus for childhood leukemia. They were blaming cancer clusters on the flu, common flu, in academic studies. Of course, flus don't cause cancer clusters. This was in Crumbia, right alongside of Sellafield in the United Kingdom. So the nuclear academic is the worst scum on the planet. Murderers and child molesters and rapists got nothing on nuclear academics. Nuclear academics, nuclear scientists are infinitely... It's better to have pedophiles for a neighbor than nuclear scientists. Big change in the number of child deaths in Fukushima due to illnesses. Death from cardiovascular disease doubled. Cancer, leukemia has increased. And they left the bags where they are and then grew food there and said everything is in the bags, don't worry about it, grow the food. And we're going to ship it to all the countries worldwide. They never stopped growing food in the nuclear wasteland, first off. The farmers were given useless Geiger counters and told to check for radiation. Don't ship it if you find too much. Now, every nuclear academic on the planet should be taken to Fukushima and disposed of. Staggering number of cancers, illnesses, birth defects. This is a Hanford, by the way. Over 700 cases in just 4 square miles around Hanford. 700 cancers, illnesses, birth defects linked to nuclear waste in a 4 square kilometer zone. Hanford is a brutal nuclear wasteland. So the school should be abandoned. Even with a shitty Geiger counter shows you that number, you should abandon immediately. Physicians report increases cancers around nuclear sites, birth defects, stillbirths, spontaneous abortions are on the rise. Cancer found in over 40 children. Outbreak of cancer is underway in Fukushima children. Clear evidence of an epidemic. Yeah, there's extra 865,000 cancers in the first year compared to any other year. Spike. Almost 1 million extra cancers. And cancer is one of the last ones of the 1800 diseases to show up, sure. Fukushima radiation is killing the children. Heart problems, leukemias, thyroids. Terrible things. Authorities are hiding the truth to the world. We've got to admit that many people are dying. This is the story today. This is why we've done all that tonight. The town hit by Fukushima nuclear disaster, nuclear meltdowns, that's abandoned for over a decade. They opened up 10% of it. It's got 14 million one-ton bags in the town. And who knows how much radioactive waste from the nuclear meltdown itself, because that's where they're storing it. Only 10% is open, and they're shipping children 100 kilometers to go to school to try to give nuclear a good name. Hey, why don't we make, every time we find a pedophile, why don't we make them kindergarten school teachers instead? Because it makes more sense, right? At least the children are not going to die. Town hit by Fukushima nuclear disaster welcomes school kids back for the first time in 12 years. Imagine getting a job where your job is to censor me. You get 18 or 20 bucks an hour or 30 bucks an hour, and your job is to censor me. So that the world doesn't know how evil nuclear is, and you take the job. Nobody watching this would take that job, I hope, right? I would imagine. Except for the censorer who took the job. And don't tell their families what they're doing for a living, I can guarantee you. And can you imagine how evil you got to be to take the job to censor someone like me? And I have every right, I have an obligation to be outraged too. I have an obligation to condemn the people that are doing this, don't I? I have a duty to do that because there's no one else doing it. So it's like I'm on an alien planet. A journalist is someone to fear, not someone to covet. An academic is someone to hate, not someone to like. A university is something to despise, not something to appreciate. How the fuck do we ever get to this stage? How do we ever become discomplacent? The family's home is within the area being used as an interim storage facility for contaminated soil and other byproducts of the nuclear meltdown in the prefecture. 11 becquerels a kilogram, children start to see heart problems. And you're going to and 50 becquerels a kilogram, irreversible heart damage. And you're going to send children back into that nuclear wasteland. Japan's safety level standards and radiation levels for children are unconscionable. And that mayor, that despicable, disgusting, revolting, heartless, spineless, soulless mayor, is proof that monsters really do exist. They really, really, really do exist. And that's one of them, right? It's hard to reconcile that we're the only show worldwide that is condemning and strongly condemning something so evil. I can't wrap my mind around the silence worldwide. Nobody is speaking out and saying it's wrong to send children to a nuclear wasteland, and the media's out there pretending that it's good. They're right alongside of multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 detonated fuel pools. How can you be a human anywhere worldwide and not condemn this? How does that actually work? You know, they're 2 miles away from this creature. The fallout covered the entire planet. So going to school 2 kilometers, and that's 8 hours a day exposed to it. And you're going to drive 100 kilometers back to your home city. I can't understand that level of evilness. I can't understand that. I can't comprehend something like that. This story's tortured me all day on top of that, and yesterday, the day before, and the day before, right? Because we covered it. But today I had to dedicate a show to it, because again today, it's the major headline. The media's out there bragging of how evil they actually are. Not a single person in the media denounced it, sending children to a nuclear wasteland. Town hit by nuclear meltdown, not nuclear disaster, nuclear meltdown. Call it what it is, you piece of shit. You disgusting coward. And you're sending them into a nuclear wasteland. You soulless, heartless, despicable, disgusting creatures. You just stupid, useless humans, you, in the nuclear industry. You're useless sacks of skin. I can only hope the worst for all of you in the nuclear industry. I despise everything about you. Nothing but contempt for you. I have the utmost contempt for everybody in the nuclear industry. I have actual hate, which shouldn't exist in anybody's heart. But you made me hate you in the nuclear industry. Let's close the poll down, I suppose, because... Are Japan's nuclear regulators despicable fucking monsters for letting kids go to school in a nuclear wasteland known as Okuma, where the reactors are still melting down? Thanks for the people that censor me night. Must be nice to be a scumbag.
I'm not joking. They took the radioactive debris from Fukushima the day after the tsunami hit, and they had it all ready to go. The 60 years worth of stored radioactive fuel, they had it all ready to go on pallets. The reactor was already shut down in maintenance mode when the earthquake hit. Then the tsunami came in, and Fukushima sits about 30 to 40 feet up off the ocean, up on a big mound. And so the wave that came in was only 30 to 40 feet high at the most, so it only got a couple feet of water that came in. They faked the damage, took the debris, the 60 years worth of stored radioactive debris, took it quickly, had to have buried it in the ground somewhere nearby, not far away, I mean, in the same region most likely, and buried it in a casket of, buried the waste in the casket of tsunami debris, and then blow up the thing 2 days later, 3 days later, and sprinkle some radium around so you get a radioactive debris, slight detection, kind of heavy, making the Geiger counters click around the plant itself, and then everything goes away within a few years. No radiation reaches the shores of the United States, no radiation detected. I drove all the way across the country taking readings, and here we are. I still can take readings, and it's still incredibly low. It's below what we would consider normal range being 30 to 40 clicks per minute. So that being said, the fish is fine. And I've already done tests on the fish too. So the whole Fukushima thing's a scam, guys. They took the debris, buried it in the ground over there, and are collecting money for a thing that they blew up. And all they did was blow it up and sprinkle a little radium around the area or whatever, and everybody thinks that it's a nuclear meltdown. Notice all the robots keep dying. Oh yeah, robot keeps dying. So on here on the card, right off the